Hey guys, and welcome to Chapter 9, which is on weather. Weather, I think, is a fascinating topic in that every day the weather changes, and it's something we're trying to predict because we want to know how to prepare ourselves. So we're going to talk today, how do we measure weather conditions, all right? So you turn on Weather Channel, you get a map like this. What does all this stuff mean on this map? And what are the patterns? How does it work? All right, we're going to be going through that in this chapter. So I encourage you guys, even just take a look at weather.com. Some of you guys may have the weather app on your phones. Play around with it. It's actually really cool. You can actually see animations of where the storms are going. They try to predict where they're going over the hours, and sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong, but generally, just so you guys know, they're right 75% of the time. So it's pretty good compared to what it used to be. It's only going to get better over time. But what is the weather? It's the condition of the Earth's atmosphere, so at a given time. So this is something on a day-to-day basis that will change, and the same weather patterns don't always happen each year. So we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Weather conditions, they could be windy, it could be hot and cold, it could be dry in some cases, it could be sunny. So there's different conditions of the atmosphere at different given points. And it could be humid. You could also have precipitation falling. So these are all different things you guys should be already familiar with, these terms. Okay, so scientists basically record data each day, and they track the way storms move, and they also look at, from city to city, what's happening to the weather over the course of hours. And every weather station across the country is measuring the following things, including temperature, which we use degrees Fahrenheit in our country, air pressure, which is in either millibars or inches, and there's actually a mercury liquid actually measures pressure, so that's something we use. We can't use that in school, obviously, but they have other devices also that don't use mercury as well. Humidity is in percentages, so that's how much moisture is in the air. Wind speed, miles per hour or knots. Typically, if you're on your boat, they'll measure it in knots, which is a nautical term. And wind direction, we want to know where the wind is coming from because different temperatures can come about from different weather wind directions. So therefore, that can really dictate the way the weather is. And then just some terms. All right, so you can have any of the compass directions, north, south, east, west, or northeast, northwest for the wind direction. And different cloud covers. So you have partly cloudy, mostly cloudy, you have clear. And on the left here, there's a description of that. Overcast is 100% cloudy. Mostly cloudy is 60-70% cloudy. And partly cloudy is 30 to 50. So you'll hear those in the forecasts from time to time. So air pressure is something we measure, and the way they originally did it was they had a column of mercury, and the air would push down on the column of mercury and force the mercury up the tube, and whatever height it was is the amount of pressure is acting on that. So it's basically how much the air is pushing down on the surface. And why is this important? Well, it's going to determine what the weather is like. So we use a device called a barometer. So barometers measure air pressure. And the units are millibars of mercury or inches of mercury, based on this exact contraption here, which is a barometer. And then there's other types, like this is actually one that's actually a dial-based thing, where it measures how much the pressure is pushing down on some sort of spring-loaded device, and it has to be calibrated to the weather forecast, but that's another type right there. All right. And high pressure means dry weather, low pressure means wet weather. So that's what we look at. So if we see the pressure changing, we can tell what type of weather is coming. All right, so getting into that, so how does pressure affect? So high pressure, dry, as I said, that's your good weather. So whenever you see the big H's on the weather map, those are high and dry conditions. and tends to be a slightly cooler, even though sometimes it can be sunny with the dry conditions. But in general, sometimes clouds can also be an insulating factor, meaning it can keep it warmer on the surface. All right, so high equals dry weather. Low pressure, I like to remember, lousy weather. So your wet weather, your stormy weather is going to be low pressure. So all the big L's here are the wet weather in this map here. Okay, humidity is also something you hear about, especially during the summertime. And the little comic is illustrating that. So is it humid today or what? And this fish actually up in the sky. It's kind of a joke because the sky being so wet. But basically humidity is a measure of that. So the amount of water vapor in the air to the amount it can hold. And obviously, higher humidity, there's going to be a higher percentage of chance of rainfall. So measured in percentages, and the device on the left, bottom left there, is called a sling psychrometer. So what happens on that, there's two thermometers on it. Okay, one is actually has a cloth covering on it, and the other one is just a straight up thermometer, and you swing it around after you wet it. And what happens, the wet wick one, the one with the sock, will actually dry out according to the moisture conditions in the air, and that will change the temperature on it. And obviously the closer the temperatures of the two thermometers are, that means the air is going to be more moist. Okay, so humidity, there's a special chart that you can actually measure using this psychrometer. So wet the wet bulb is the first way you use it, and then you spin the psychrometer. You measure the wet and dry bulb temperatures. So the wet is the one with the wet sock on it, and then the dry bulb is the ordinary thermometer. Subtract them, and then look at a humidity table to determine the humidity. So you guys will definitely do this next year in earth science. This year you're just kind of exploring it briefly, but next year it will be on the Regents exam. So here's an example of that chart right here. So if we have a dry bulb of 20, and we found the difference between the wet bulb and dry bulb to be 3. So say the temperature was 20 and the wet bulb ended up being 17, you would get a difference of 3. And then you see where the two meet, and then you find out, boom, it's 74% humidity. And that's how you use that chart. So one more example of that. So dry bulb 21, wet bulb 15. So if you subtract that, 21 minus 15 gives you a difference of 6. Okay. Now, the problem with 21, it's not on the chart. Okay, so what we can do, we look at 21 is between what two numbers, and on the chart before, it's between 20 and 22. And you look at a difference of 6, which you just calculated, and you go down that column, find 20 and 22, and you notice 53 and 51% are the humidities for those temperatures, but we know it's 21, so it's going to be between them. So the answer ends up being 52%. So you always pick the middle number if it's in between number for the dry bulb. That's why they only did the even number column. The odd numbers are left out because you could easily calculate it if you just go in between the numbers. Okay, how do we measure the wind? The wind is a horizontal movement of air. It's always going to blow from areas of high pressure to low pressure. So yet another reason why we measure air pressure. We can actually figure out which way the wind's going to blow. Anemometer, that's the one here with the cups on it, half open cups. And you see these on top of sailboats. And what they do is basically they spin around in a circle, and how fast they spin will be the wind speed. And then the second one is called a wind vane. And some people have these on top of their houses. It's usually a rooster like this. And whatever way the arrow points tells you the wind direction. And we always tell which way the wind comes from. So the arrow is actually pointing in which way the wind is coming from. So in this case, this one's pointing towards the northwest. It's between north and west. So that would be a northwest wind. Okay, and then lastly, precipitation, whether it be snowfall or rainfall. The one you see here, this is actually a rain gauge. So this is used for rainfall. The water will collect in the cup, and then how many inches of rain that falls will be measured. And obviously, this is important for especially farmers to keep track of their crops, and then of course our yards. All right, so whether or not to turn on your sprinkler system or not. A rain gauge might be important for that. Some people have that actually attached to their sprinkler systems, some sort of rain gauge system that will turn off their sprinkler system when it's rained a lot. So that's the basics of weather, and we will talk more about this as we continue through the chapter.